Keep the engine of the state running. It is the single most important rule for any government navigating a prolonged conflict. But deep inside the Russian system, the gears are violently seizing up, and the official narrative is cracking under the strain. During a recent meeting on macroeconomic issues, Vladimir Putin slipped up. He publicly acknowledged what the Kremlin usually tries to bury. Russia's gross domestic product contracted by 1.8% in the first 2 months of 2026. A shrinking economy during a wartime mobilization is a massive problem. But Putin didn't attribute this drop to sanctions or a dragging war. He blamed the calendar. According to the Russian president, the economy shrank by nearly 2% simply because January and February had 3 fewer working days. This chart directly compares the economic performance of major world powers during that exact same timeframe. The UK, the US, and Japan all recorded growth ranging from 0.1 to 0.5%. Meanwhile, Russia plummeted into the negative. Other nations did not possess extra working days that Russia somehow missed out on. Blaming leap years and long weekends for a macroeconomic slide shows a regime running out of viable excuses. The data is catching up to them, forcing the Kremlin into increasingly desperate attempts at spin. To distract from the shrinking GDP, Putin pointed to another statistic, a purportedly record-low unemployment rate of 2.1%. On paper, that sounds like a booming society. In reality, it is a glaring warning sign. When an unemployment rate dips this unnaturally low during a massive conflict, it signals that the labor pool itself has dried up. Businesses aren't thriving. They simply cannot find workers to fill open shifts. Russia is suffering a severe demographic vacuum. Since the invasion began, the country has absorbed over 1.3 million war casualties, a massive segment of the working-age male population removed from the domestic workforce. On top of that, the state faces an annual shortfall of 550,000 migrant workers just to stop its population from shrinking. The disappearance of millions of workers triggers a systemic labor crisis that cannot be solved by simply adjusting interest rates or printing more rubles. The immediate result of that missing workforce is chaos in the corporate sector. Russian job platforms report that 73% of companies are currently understaffed. To compete for the few remaining workers, businesses are forced to aggressively hike wages, a move the head of Russia's central bank, Elvira Nabiullina, has flagged as a direct threat to domestic stability. These forced wage hikes inflate production costs, which are immediately passed down to consumers, creating persistent price shocks at the grocery store and the gas pump. This line graph tracks the Russian central bank's business climate indicator. Any number above 0 signals growth. As the labor shortage compounded, the index snapped from a positive 0.2 down to negative 0.1 in a single month. The factories are slowing down. We can see this failure playing out in real time. Major Russian auto manufacturers like Avtovaz and Kamaz are halting production lines and cutting staff down to 4-day or even 3-day work weeks. The paralysis has even infiltrated the defense sector. Uralvagonzavod, Russia's premier tank manufacturer, has enacted mass layoffs, slashing headcount in some of its units by up to 50%. Russia's industrial core has hit a hard limit. Without human capital, it is physically impossible to maintain current production levels or remain solvent. When business activity collapses, the federal budget starves. Russia aggressively hiked value-added taxes and excise fees to extract every last ruble from its remaining businesses. Yet the government is still left with a $60 billion budget deficit. Look at this diverging bar chart. Even after heavy taxation, Russia only managed a 7% increase in revenue. Meanwhile, federal expenditures, driven by the relentless cost of the war, spiked by 17%. The state is bleeding cash faster than it can replace it. Historically, the Kremlin would plug this budget hole by using its vast energy exports, but federal revenues derived from oil and gas taxes have suffered a devastating 45.4% year-on-year drop. Russia did see a brief spike in oil revenues recently, but it was tied to the blockades in the Strait of Hormuz during the U.S. operation against Iran. Global oil prices hovered near $100 a barrel, allowing Russia to take advantage of a crisis it didn't create. Russia's budget is now dependent on external band-aids to cover a fatal internal hemorrhage. The moment global tensions ease and global oil prices drop, the Kremlin falls right back into the abyss. When you look at the empty factories and the $60 billion deficit, the solution seems obvious. Pull the troops back, end the war, and stop the bleeding. But ending the conflict would only reveal a deeper, more permanent catastrophe. The economic rot in Russia is a structural feature of the regime itself. For decades, the Kremlin has operated on a policy of guns over butter. This chart shows how resources have been systematically drained from domestic infrastructure, healthcare, and civil services to enrich regional elites and feed the military machine. This centralization of wealth was a deliberate choice. By keeping regional areas impoverished, the state created a desperate recruiting pool for its army. Infrastructure was left to decay because a healthy, educated, and mobile population is harder to control than one struggling for basic survival. The invasion of Ukraine acted as a catalyst, exposing a structural decay that has been hollowing out the Russian economy for decades. Years of underinvestment have left the country without the social foundation or the infrastructure needed to pivot back to a civilian economy. The current collapse reveals the end state of Putin's system, a country that has been cannibalized for the benefit of a few, leaving no foundation left for a post-war recovery. Russia cannot and will not recover until that entire system is dismantled.